and the smell of incense fills her room.
1968 overflowed with classics, yet a stack of sharp rock cuts slipped between the rotating doors of AM and FM. Here are 13 tracks from that crowded year that deserve a bigger spotlight. Number 1, The Red Telephone, Love.
I feel real phony when my name is
After finishing Forever Changes, Arthur Lee steered the band back into Sunset Sound to capture this anxious waltz. He sang through a plate reverb normally reserved for strings, giving the opening line, sitting on a hillside, watching all the people die, its distant echo. Guitarist Johnny Eccles doubled the acoustic track with a hollow body through a tiny Gibson Skylark amp. Every time the tremolo throbbed too hard, engineer Bruce Botnick simply turned the mic a few degrees off axis rather than ask Lee for another take. Elektra pressed the song as a promo single in February 1968, hoping college FM stations would dig the harpsichord coda and tempo shifts. Los Angeles DJs spun it at midnight, yet national top 40 programmers balked at the 6+ minutes and the line about cellophane brains. Sales stalled under 25,000 copies, but the tune became a staple at the Whiskey A Go-Go, where Lee would stop the band on a dime and let the audience chant the "We're all normal and we won our freedom" mantra until the house lights flashed. Decades later, Noel Gallagher borrowed the descending bass hook for an Oasis B-side, quietly admitting the lift in a Q interview. Number 2, Street Song, The 13th Floor Elevators.
Well, I'm going back to the country.
Rocky Erickson dragged the elevators into Houston's Andra Studios after a long night on U.S. Highway 290, scribbling lyrics on the back of a Texaco receipt, while Tommy Hall unpacked his signature electric jug. Stacy Sutherland tracked his lead guitar through a Fender Showman head with one tube half blown, giving every bend a gritty wobble that engineer Walt Andrus let ride. The group's label, International Artists, shipped the single to Texas radio in July 1968. KILT Houston gave it decent evening spins, but programmers upstate felt the electric jug sounded like feedback. Wrong era, wrong market. A scheduled American Bandstand slot evaporated when producers previewed the line "Sweet Street Angel" on a Tombstone Love, unsure how to pan for family television. Without national push, the record sold mainly in head shops and campus bookstores, moving barely 10,000 units. Still, the Elevators closed most 1968 sets with Street Song, Hall holding the jug to a floor monitor, coaxing sub-bass drones, while Erickson hit a final A major scream that rattled ceiling tiles. Austin psych bands keep the cut alive. The Black Angels once opened a Levitation festival by looping that jug drone as house music, an inside nod to a nearly missed single that never aimed for easy listening. Number 3, The Garden of Earthly Delights, the United States of America. Joseph Byrd wanted a rock band with no guitars, so he filled Columbia's Hollywood room with ring modulators, tape echo loops, and a homemade synthesizer built from surplus Air Force parts. During basic tracking, Dorothy Moskowitz sang into a ribbon mic fed through a rotating speaker. Engineer David Rubinson flipped the speed knob mid-phrase to make her voice swirl like a calliope. Electric violinist Gordon Marin doubled the main melody, bow coated in rosin so thick, clouds puffed every time he dug in. Columbia pressed the single in March 1968 and mailed it to progressive FM outlets. KPPC Pasadena loved the spaced-out carnival vibe, but top 40 stations shrugged at lyrics comparing modern life to Bosch's chaotic triptych. The album squeaked onto Billboard at number 181, then disappeared. Yet college art departments latched onto the song. UCLA's film school screened abstract animations to the track for years. Beck sampled one of the violin squeals on a 1994 B-side, and when Dorothy Moskowitz surfaced at a 2017 Moogfest panel, half the questions were about how they made that warbling "ah" before the first chorus. She smiled and said, "A Leslie cabinet and a good bit of luck." Number 4, long time coming, The Electric Flag.
Should have quit you a long time ago.
Mike Bloomfield rolled into Columbia's Hollywood studio with a Les Paul Sunburst, 3 horn players, and drummer Buddy Miles already pounding a 2/4 on the lid of a road case. The tape began rolling before the amps had warmed, so the first few bars catch Bloomfield's pickups humming. Producer John Court let the horns play loose rather than stack perfect triads. You can hear baritone saxman Stem C. Hunter laugh after nailing a growling low note in the second verse. Bloomfield overdubbed a second guitar line through a borrowed Univox fuzz, then left the control room because he hated hearing playbacks sober. Columbia issued A Long Time Comin' in March 1968. The album hit number 31, yet the track never received its own 45. Too long, too many tempo flips, said the label. FM rock jocks disagreed. WNEW New York spun it beside Born to Be Wild, introducing East Coast listeners to Bloomfield's jazz-tinged bends and Buddy Miles's rolling tom fills. Carlos Santana credits the solo's high register bends for inspiring his own sustained-soaked approach, while Chicago horn bands studied the Flag's punchy charts as a blueprint for mixing brass with blues licks. Bloomfield left 6 months later, but that whirlwind take, horns barking, guitars soaring, remains the best evidence of what his American music band sounded like before all the wheels came off. Number 5, Smell of Incense, Southwest FOB.
And the smell of incense fills her room.
Dallas seniors Dan Seals and John Coley took their 12-piece high school outfit to Robin Hood Bryan's studio in Tyler, Texas, one muggy June evening. Session time cost $50 an hour, so they tracked everything live. Coley on a borrowed Fender 7-string, Seals handling the fuzz guitar hook with a lipstick pickup, Dan Electro straight into a Maestro FZ1. Keyboardist Larry Bubba Cooley drove his Hammond B3 through a Leslie cabinet jammed in a hallway. The spinning rotor swooshing so loudly, engineer Robin Hood had to drape moving blankets over the doorway. The song itself comes from the West Coast pop art experimental band, but the FOB cut the 7-minute original down to 2 minutes 55 seconds, swapping the psych freakout for a big bass drum thump and a 1-bar cowbell break. Abnack rushed the single out on the 24th of August 1968 and mailed copies to every Texas station with a Boss 40 chart. KLIF Dallas jumped first, pushing the record into regional top 10s. Nationally, it peaked at number 56 on Billboard and number 43 on Cashbox. Solid, but not enough for the band's lone cross-country tour, where blown power amps forced Seals to borrow gear from opening act Kenny Rogers and the First Edition. Within 2 years, the group splintered, yet crate diggers still chase the swirl vinyl promo pressing. Fewer than 1,000 were made, and half have the telltale incense stick burnt on the sleeve from college dorm rooms. Number 6, Porpoise song, The Monkees. Carole King found the chord pattern while fooling with a Wurlitzer in Western Recorder's break room. Jerry Goffin scribbled lyrics on Union stationery before producer Jack Nietzsche could fetch a music stand. At the main console, Nietzsche lined up French horns, sleigh bells, and Ry Cooder's National Steel, then patched Studio Ocean Wave effects onto a spare track for the fade. Mickey Dolenz laid down the lead vocal after midnight, lights dim, singing through plate reverb that made each goodbye drift like sonar pings. Mike Nesmith overdubbed 12-string Gretsch fills and quipped, "Either this sells bread or it bombs, nothing in between." Coal Gems issued the single on the 5th of October 1968 to herald the Monkees' film Head. AM programmers hesitated at the 4-minute runtime and the murky opening line about standing on the edge of the water. The record stalled at number 62 on the Hot 100, though late-night FM DJs loved the underwater vibe and spun it beside early Floyd. Coal Gems pressed marble vinyl promos for Los Angeles theaters showing Head. Ticket buyers walked out humming the hypnotic chorus without deciding if they'd just watched a comedy or a farewell note. Decades later, the sample-centric act Sample Delecka looped Cooder's backwards guitar lick for a chill-out single, nudging a new audience to track down the original and discover the Monkees' most psychedelic 3.5 minutes. Number 7, Think About It, The Yardbirds. The Yardbirds were days from breaking up when they ducked into London's Advision studio to tape this B-side. Jimmy Page brought a battered Telecaster and a brand new fuzz pedal he'd picked up on Denmark Street. The band ran the song live, Page's guitar bleeding into Keith Ralph's vocal mic because the studio had only 4 isolation screens left. The solo, quick pull-offs that rushed up and down the neck, was captured on the second take, straight into a small Vox combo set loud enough to buzz the grill cloth. Epic shipped the single to U.S. stations that March, flipping it behind Goodnight Sweet Josephine. Top 40 programmers mostly ignored it, yet underground FM jocks in New York and San Francisco kept the flip side in light rotation, often introducing it as the sound of Led Zeppelin warming up after word leaked about Page's next band. Because no UK pressing ever appeared, American promo copies with the bright orange Epic label now sell for more than the A-side. Collector proof that the real fireworks hit on the back of the 45. For those of you who don't know, a 45 is shorthand for a 7-inch vinyl single that spins at 45 revolutions per minute. From the 1950s through the 1980s, labels released most hit songs in that format. One track on the A-side for radio play, another often less promoted song on the B-side. Number 8, The Legend of a Mind, The Moody Blues. Flutist Ray Thomas wrote this 6.5-minute track as a friendly nod to psychologist turned LSD guru Timothy Leary. At Decca's West Hempstead studio, Thomas laid down the main flute riff first, then the band added mellotron strings and a slow tom-tom groove that drops to near silence before a chorus bass lifts everything skyward. Justin Hayward's Red Gibson 335 slips in clean guitar runs between the flute phrases, a trick he said copied Booker T's Time to Breathe approach. Decca loved the song but skipped a single release, afraid the Leary reference would spark trouble with the BBC. Even without a 45, the track took off on late night FM in Los Angeles, where KMET used the psychedelic middle section as a bridge between weather and news. College stations followed, helping In Search of the Lost Chord crack the U.S. Top 30. Concert crowds came prepared. By the 1970 U.S. tour, fans in the first rows held up flashlights during the He'll Take You Higher line, giving the band a DIY light show just for that moment. Number 9, Song for Jeffrey, Jethro Tull. Jethro Tull were still living in a damp bedsit off London's Westbourne Grove when Ian Anderson wrote this nod to future bassist Jeffrey Hammond. At Sound Techniques in Chelsea, he tracked the opening bass flute riff, standing barefoot so he could feel the floor vibrations. Engineer John Wood had to fold a blanket under the mic stand to stop the thunk. Guitarist Mick Abrams answered with a bottleneck lick on a borrowed Telecaster run through a small Vox combo, cranked high enough to sing. Chrysalis pressed the single in the UK that November and shipped promo copies to BBC Radio 1, where John Peel spun it twice in one weekend, calling the slide flute break saucy. Sales crept into the lower reaches of the chart but never climbed, squeezed out by the Move's latest and a flood of Christmas singles. Even so, Rolling Stones producer Michael Lindsay Hogg invited Tull to mime the track for the shelved Rock and Roll Circus TV special. Anderson lurked at the edge of the circular stage, top hat pulled low, swirling flute notes through clouds of dry ice that smelled like cherry cough syrup. The footage finally aired in 1996, decades after most people assumed the song had disappeared with the band's early blues period. Number 10, Dark Star, Grateful Dead.
You and I were weekend.
Jerry Garcia and lyricist Robert Hunter built Dark Star around 2 chords because they wanted space to drift, not a tune that snapped shut. Warner Brothers insisted on a single, so the Dead cut a compact version at Columbus Recorders in San Francisco, just under 3 minutes. Garcia's SG snaking around Ron Pigpen McKernan's chiming organ, while Mickey Hart shakes sleigh bells like distant surf. Released in April 1968, the 45 stalled well below the Hot 100. AM programmers said the lyric "Searchlight Casting for Faults" felt vague, and the fade-out arrived just when the jam threatened to get interesting. On stage, though, the band stretched the song far past radio limits. A January '69 Fillmore West take ran 23 minutes, veering through feedback swells and silence so tense you could hear amp hum. Warner recycled that performance onto the 1969 Live Dead album, and underground stations flipped the LP to side one, announcing, "Clear your schedule," before dropping the needle. By the mid-70s, the single pressing of Dark Star had become a crate-digging trophy. DJs liked to cue the tiny studio edit, then crossfade into a sprawling live tape just to watch newcomers' faces when the trip kept going. Number 11, Fire Brigade, The Move. Roy Wood finished the chorus while kettle water boiled, rang drummer Bev Bevan, and booked a late slot at Olympic. In the studio, Wood hit his 1960 Gibson 335 through an overdriven Laney head. Engineer George Kientz angled a single Shure mic so close the cone dimpled, then added a second mic on a toy fire bell for the two-note ding-ding. Producer Denny Cordell kept bassist Trevor Burton's Fender Precision just high enough in the mix to drive the staccato stops that mimic a fire engine siren. Regal Zonophone pressed 20,000 UK singles on release day, the 2nd of February 1968, and BBC Radio 1 spun it at breakfast the following Monday, pushing sales past 100,000 in a fortnight. To hype the record, the band appeared on Top of the Pops wearing fire helmets. Viewers wrote in asking if the bell was real or a studio trick. In the United States, A&M labeled the promo Britain's loudest pop group, but only Detroit's WKNR added it in daily rotation. The rest of the country heard it mainly on evening FM shows, sandwiched between The Who and the Small Faces. When Wood later formed Wizard, he brought the bell with him, the scratched paint still showing studio gaffer tape from that first session. Number 12, Race with the Devil, Gun.
Races on, and you better run from the devil's gun.
At CBS Studios in London, brothers Adrian and Paul Gervitz set up two Marshall stacks, dimed them, and told producer Derek Lawrence they needed one take before tube heat sagged the amps. Adrian's Sunburst Les Paul carried the opening tremolo-picked run. Paul's Rickenbacker bass shadowed the riff an octave below, giving the verse a piston-like drive. Drummer Louis Farrell tracked with cymbals taped to kill ring. Lawrence wanted the stop-start accents crisp enough for AM radio meters. CBS UK shipped the single in October 1968 and watched it climb to number 8, buoyed by Caroline and Luxembourg pirate spins. European demand followed. France logged 300,000 sales, and German television booked the group for the Saturday show Beat Club, where they mimed under red flashing lights and a rear-projected drag race film loop. Epic's U.S. office pressed limited promos, but pulled tour support after regional airplay failed to push it past Billboard's Bubbling Under. Even so, the song's Palm Mute Gallop turned up quickly in club covers. Hendrix quoted the riff during a Copenhagen jam, and Judas Priest opened 1977 sets with a double-time version that later appeared on Unleashed in the East. Number 13, Under the Ice, Nas.
Under the ice. Ice.
With two singles already ignored by national radio, Todd Rundgren knew the next A-side had to bite. He lugged his red Gibson SG and a suitcase of fuzz pedals into ID Sound in La Brea, asked engineer James Lowe for the coldest reverb you've got, and layered 3 guitar tracks until the hiss almost buried the click track. Drummer Tom Mooney answered with parade snare rolls played on thick jazz brushes. He'd snapped a stick earlier and decided the softer attack let the toms rumble like distant thunder. Bassist Carson Van Osten locked to the kick drum, leaving space for Rundgren to overdub clipped harpsichord stabs on the studio's Baldwin Electric Grand. Screen Gems Cold Gems pressed 2,500 white label promos in November 1968 and shipped them east of the Mississippi, figuring mid-Atlantic college stations might warm to the song's wintry theme. WMEX Boston and WKNR Detroit bit first. Both reported heavy request lines after listeners caught the abrupt halftime drop at 1 minute 40. Even so, holiday releases by Hendrix and the Beatles hogged shelf space, and the single peaked just below local top 30s. Rundgren pushed the tune live by stacking 2 Sun cabinets and using the failed vibrato arm Warble as a show trick, holding the squeal while Mooney slammed a flam that jolted photographers off their stools. The record never saw a U.S. picture sleeve, but German presses included a black and white photo of the band in overcoats, a sleeve now trading near 3 figures among Euro collectors. Rundgren recycled the descending chord turnaround for Time Heals in 1981, tipping his hat to the song he always felt got lost in a snowdrift of bigger names. 1968 left more gems hiding in the crates than any countdown can cover. These 13 are just the start. Keep digging, there's plenty of sparkle left in that year's shadowed corners.